Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyen.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyen.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Branches of Wisdom, the Banyen Books podcast. I'm your host, Ross McKeechee, and very excited that we have as our honored guest today, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo is a bhikshuni in the Drukpa lineage of the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. She's an author, teacher, and founder of the Dongyu Gatsal Ling Nunnery in Himachal Pradesh, India. She's best known for being one of the very few Western yoginis trained in the East, having spent 12 years living in a remote cave in the Himalayas, 3 of those years in strict meditation retreat. In February 2008, Tenzin Palmo was given the rare title of Jetsunma, which means Venerable Master, by His Holiness the 12th Gyalwang Drukpa, head of the Drukpa Kagyu lineage, in recognition of her spiritual achievements as a nun and her efforts in promoting the status of female practitioners in Tibetan Buddhism. Tenzin Palmo spends most of the year at DGL Nunnery and occasionally tours to give teachings and raise funds for the ongoing needs of the nuns and the nunnery. In addition to her role as founding director of DGL Nunnery, Jetsunma is president of Sakyaditha International Association of Buddhist Women, founding director of the Alliance of Non-Himalayan Nuns, honorary advisor to the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, and founding member of the Committee for Bhikshuni Ordination. Her books include Reflections on a Mountain Lake, Teachings on Practical Buddhism, and Into the Heart of Life. Today, Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo is with Banyen Books in conversation about her new book, which is titled The Heroic Heart, Awakening Unbound Compassion. It's based on the classic 14th-century mind training text of Tibetan Buddhism called The 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva. And this guidebook shares pithy advice on how to act as bodhisattvas in our everyday lives, enabling us to possess compassion in an authentic way. Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo shares her reflections on this famous teaching and how to live a life of mindfulness and selflessness. If you'd like to learn more about Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo's life and work, please visit her website, which is tenzinpalmo.com. So Banyen community, please join me in a very warm welcome for Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. Thank you so much for joining us. So maybe we can just begin our conversation by talking about the author of the 37 verses on the practice of a bodhisattva, who is, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Thogme Sangpo, who wrote this text in the 14th century. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Kadampa lineage going back to Atisha Dipankara in the 11th century?
Well, exactly that. In the 11th century, this great Bengali scholar called Atisha Dipankara, he was invited to Tibet by the king of Western Tibet, who was concerned that somehow the Buddhism, which had been introduced into Tibet in the 8th century, had gone a bit astray, and he felt they needed a bit more guidance from the Indians. So they invited the teacher to Tibet, and he recognized that they needed to get back to the fundamentals, especially the motivation, which is to practice not only for one's own benefit, but in order to be of great benefit to all other living beings. And he emphasized very much also the qualities of bringing difficulties and difficult people, difficult situations, obstacles that we come across in our everyday lives, how to make use of all these difficult situations to enhance the path. Rather than seeing them as obstacles, we see them as opportunities. So he began this teaching on how to bring all situations onto the path, onto the spiritual path. And from him radiated many disciples, and they formed a tradition called the Kadampa. And so Tomi Zampo was one of those who came, you know, a few centuries later, but with the same emphasis. I mean, this 37 practices of Bodhisattva is concerned with how to take everything, your difficulties as well as good times, everything, and make use of it on the path. This is why it's so useful for everyday life now, because most people, you know, are not spending their lives in monasteries, but they are sincere people. They want to practice, right? I mean, in the West and in Asia, nowadays people are highly educated, but they have professions, they have families, they have social life, and they also want to bring a spiritual dimension into their lives. So they're not going to spend their time always in formal meditation in retreat, but they want to make use of their daily life, right? To prevent their lives from such being meaningless, you know, secular occupations. They want to integrate the spiritual into their daily lives, make meaning out of their daily lives. So these teachings are extremely practical. And even though they were delivered now in the 14th century, they are as applicable today as, you know, centuries before. This is why now more and more people are beginning to recognize how extraordinarily useful these teachings are. And because they're in verses, you can take just one verse and really sit and think about it, right? How I can apply this to my life. So this is why in the last years, now I've retired, but in the last years, I was mostly giving teachings on what is called Lojong, or mind training, because it's so useful, so very, very useful for people's lives. Transforms their people's lives, actually.
Thank you. The first chapter, and just to give people an idea, this is a wonderful book, and there's 37 chapters, of course, for the 37 verses, and Jetsunma gives a commentary on each verse. Now, the first chapter is titled Making Life Meaningful. You just mentioned people are looking for meaning in their lives. Is it okay if I share that verse? Okay. So the verse says, "Now that I have this great ship, a precious human life, so hard to obtain, I must carry myself and others across the ocean of samsara. To that end, to listen, reflect, and meditate day and night without distraction is the practice of a bodhisattva." You make it very clear in that chapter that there's no time off in the practice of a bodhisattva. I'm just wondering if you can give us some pointers on how to cultivate that kind of stamina and alertness in body and mind.
You know, I mean, it's not a matter of being, you know, tense and I can't lose a second, you know, I've got to be on the path and getting extraordinary uptight about it. It's not like that. In fact, it's a matter of learning how to relax into the moment, into the present. And so I think the two main qualities which we need to take with us are first to cultivate what nowadays is called mindfulness. But it means this kind of sense of awareness, of presence, of not being totally distracted by all our thinking, but being able to be at the center, right? To become more centered and more present and aware, and have a very relaxed, spacious mind instead of a very busy, tight mind. And at the same time, to have a kind heart, remembering that just as I would really rather be okay, I'd really rather feel happy than to feel miserable. I don't want to be depressed. Every being that we meet wants to feel okay and doesn't want to be depressed. I mean, some people might have very funny ideas of where happiness lies, but genuinely, people want to feel okay inside and not feel not okay inside. And so, likewise, everyone that we meet, we wish them well. You know, we try to cultivate some kindness in our life, remembering that we'd rather people were kind to us than unkind. So likewise, we should be kind to them and not unkind. So this sense of presence, of being not caught up in the past, not endlessly anticipating and being anxious about the future, being present in the moment and with an open, kind heart. That's what we have to do. In all situations, with our family, with our work colleagues, with people we meet, with not just people, but animals, insects, all beings want to be happy. So we remember that, you know. It's not a matter of, you know, running a race to some goal, but just learning how to be here and now, present with a good heart. That takes up the day, right?
Chapter 10 is titled Valuing Others. And one of the themes that comes up, it seems, I'm not a student of Buddhism, but I notice this theme coming up a lot, and that is the need for both wisdom and compassion on the path. I'm wondering if you can illuminate for us why these two qualities are considered the essence of being a bodhisattva.
Yes, wisdom and compassion are regarded as the two wings of the bird to fly towards enlightenment. If we only have lots and lots of compassion, but no wisdom, then eventually we're likely to burn out, or to be very, very kind, very, very compassionate, but not seeing the whole situation clearly, and therefore messing it up, even though we had good intentions, right? Lots of people have good intentions, but end up really creating more problems. Why? Because they lack wisdom. They lack the clear insight to see things how they really are, and in that way make informed decisions about how to help. If we only have wisdom and we don't have compassion, then it becomes quite cold, it becomes quite analytical. We see the situation very clearly, but we have no empathy. And in that way, likewise, we fail in our potential as human beings. It is regarded that the enlightened state is the fullness of our wisdom and compassion. The two of them are two sides of the same coin. So if we have wisdom, we can activate our compassion. If we have compassion, we see clearly and therefore bring into being our wisdom. So the two are the two sides of the same coin, and they're very important. As I say, they're like the wings. One wing, we'll just circle round and round and round. But with two wings, then we can fly upwards. So that's why in Buddhism, these two qualities of clear insight into the nature of reality, along with the great empathy of understanding the underlying suffering of all of us because we do not see clearly, and therefore we do suffer. We just don't know what we're doing, and therefore we create problems for ourselves, we create problems for others, and look what we're doing to the world. It's all based on our ignorance and lack of empathy. So this is why we are destroying ourselves, destroying others, destroying the whole planet. So we need to develop these two qualities equally.
Thank you. Now, the way it's my observation, and please correct me if I'm wrong, chapters 11 to 18, all of these verses deal with the practice of kindness and compassion, as well as Tonglen, and the idea of using all of the adversities that we face in life to benefit our practice and others. I'm wondering if you could help us understand the essence of how challenges and adversity can actually become something that is of benefit, and that we can actually become grateful for those things in our practice.
Well, yeah, sometimes I say it's like a spiritual gymnasium. If we go to a gym, then, you know, the trainer will look at us and say, well, you know, maybe your arms are okay, but your legs are really flabby, and put us on a machine, which will challenge our legs, right? I mean, we don't just, if it's too easy, then we'll tone it up a bit, so that, you go to the gymnasiums, they have these big, I can't understand it, these big glass, that everybody can look in and see the people training inside, and they'll, right? I mean, they're paying for this. And at the end, they come off and they feel great. And their legs, get toned up, they get muscled, they feel wonderful, they feel so much better. And they're grateful to the machines for testing them and challenging them, right? So in a way, we can consider life to be our spiritual gymnasium, right? It's challenging us. If it's too easy, we can float along, but we get very inwardly flabby, right? Thinking we're ever so much nicer than we actually are, because nothing has ever challenged that. And so therefore, in that way, we can look at the difficulties and problems which we do face in life to recognize that this is strengthening our character. This is bringing out qualities in us, which otherwise would never be recognized, which would never otherwise be needed. So in that way, we begin to recognize that even the difficulties of life, sickness, loss, people doing bad things, it's not that we go out to find them, but when they come, we can make use of them. Instead of being angry, depressed, resentful, we can say, this is my challenge now. How can I respond to this situation in a way which will transform it from an obstacle into a spiritual opportunity? For example, one of the qualities needed on the path spiritually is patience, tolerance, forbearance. Well, we need things and people who, push our buttons in order to develop these qualities, right? I mean, I always say it's very easy to be loving to people who are lovable. That doesn't require any particular qualities of our nature. Naturally, we're nice to people who are nice. But the thing is, how do we respond to people who are not nice? People who really, cause us a lot of trouble and a lot of problems. Well, either we can be very angry and upset and want revenge or whatever, or we can say, well, these people are here to teach me patience and forbearance. So far from resenting them, we can be grateful and see them. I mean, in the text, it says, you know, we see them as our spiritual teachers. We even maybe put them on the top of our head out of respect. Because why? They are teaching us this very, very important quality of forbearance, tolerance, and patience. So in this way, there are many, many different techniques for taking difficult things which we would normally regard as being hopelessly painful and using them instead as a great spiritual impetus to develop ourselves and to cultivate the qualities of the heart which need to have opposition in order to flourish. So this is what the text is all about. It's about taking all the things which normally would cause us to be very upset and depressed and angry, and just turning the whole picture around and feeling grateful for this opportunity to spiritually develop. That's what it's all about. Which is helpful for everybody, because everybody ends up having, you know, problems and difficulties and challenges in life. And instead of resenting that, we should say, okay, good, this is my time to, you know, put on my armor as a good little spiritual warrior and go forth.
Chapter 19, recognizing what is truly valuable, looks at the other side of the coin, which is you say that, you know, a lot of people will struggle or fall apart spiritually when things are not going well, and other people might struggle more when things are going well. The other side of the coin. Can you speak a little bit to that side of things?
Well, the point is that if things are too easy and there is no sense of need to make effort, right? And if we are always, as I am, surrounded by people who are so lovely and nice, then I can definitely fool myself to thinking I'm lovely and nice too, because it's very easy. You know, you're a mirror to the people, and if people are friendly, then we are friendly. And then we think, oh, I'm a friendly person. And so that's the danger there, that we can become complacent and regard ourselves as much more spiritually advanced than we actually are. And so that's the danger with things being too comfortable and too pleasant, that we can be beguiled into thinking we've already accomplished, whereas actually it's simply that we have never received any opposition. So then when we do meet with things which go wrong, we are like people who are always lying around on the couch and thinking they're healthy, but then when they suddenly have to go trekking, they discover that they completely fall apart. And this is the danger there. The danger there is in imagine there's nothing to be done because there's been nothing to arouse our negative thinking, right? I mean, so then we think we don't have negative thinking. And it's only then when we do meet with difficulties that we discover what needs to be done. So this is the problem with everything being too comfortable, is that we delude ourselves into thinking that we don't need any more work, that we've already accomplished, and that's not true. So that can be a danger on the spiritual path. If you're, I mean, like, you know, these big gurus, and they have everybody around them bowing down and, you know, praising them and so forth, and then they think they're really something special, whereas maybe it's just simply because they haven't had to deal with opposition and difficulties, and when people do oppose them, then they might get very upset and very angry. And that's a good thing, because then they can, if they've got any humility, they can realize there's still a lot of work to do.
That leads me into a question I wanted to ask. Chapter 23, not profiting from Dharma. I found it really insightful, and it touches on what you just mentioned. You talked about a lot of the young reincarnate lamas being sent out to teach too early because their centers need to raise money and they haven't completed their training. And so it's easy to fall into the pitfall of taking on everybody's praise. And I was really curious to know what your experience was after the publication of Cave in the Snow. For those who don't know, that was the biography by Vicki McKenzie about Jetsunma and her 12 years in retreat in a cave in the Himalayas. You started also going out and raising funds for your nunnery, and you went from a life of a lot of solitude to being very much in the public eye. How was that for your sadhana? How did that impact your practice?
Well, again, I mean, I have been very fortunate because, well, fortunate or unfortunate, depending how you look at it. Because again, as I traveled around the world all over, one only met with really very kind people. And it was very interesting to see how, you know, East or West, people are facing the same challenges in their life, and they have the same wish to find a path which is relevant for the kind of lives which they are leading. And I think it's very important to realize that we're, you know, wherever we are from, we are all human beings. And we all have the same spiritual potential, but also we also face many of the same problems as humans. And so going around meeting all these people, I really appreciated how profound the Dharma is and how really beneficial it is if we take just, you know, it can be as complicated as we want it to be, and it can be as simple as we want it to be, right? The Dharma can be very, very complex. And at the same time, the essential message is very, very simple, which is dealing with how to tame and train and understand the nature of our consciousness, of our mind. And so, you know, as I say, wherever I went, basically the same kind of questions came again and again and again. People wanting to know how to take this practice and integrate it with their life. And I found that very inspiring, right? You know, because nowadays it's not just something exclusively for monks. It's now something which has spread out in all directions. And it has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with nationality or social status. It is how to become genuinely human, how to cultivate a good heart. And yeah, it was good going out and meeting people from all around the world and seeing how much we are so alike once you know, get down just a tiny, tiny little bit. Really, there we all are, struggling human beings who are trying to realize our Buddha potential.
Thank you. Maybe if we could switch gears a bit, I just want to remind people to send in their questions and that we're speaking about Jetsunma's latest book, which is The Heroic Heart, Awakening Unbound Compassion. I was watching the documentary Cave in the Snow, and in that documentary, you were speaking about the difficulty for women to get teachings in Tibetan Buddhism when you were a young nun. I'm wondering what the landscape is like in present day, because I know in that documentary in the year 2000, you were speaking with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and you said, you know, you received your bhikshuni ordination in Hong Kong in 1973, and this was now the year 2000, and it was still just being talked about. Nothing had changed really. So I'm wondering, it's 2022 now. What has changed? What hasn't changed? Where are we at?
Well, some things have changed. I mean, nowadays there are many very good nunneries, this is for women, nunneries which have been established, and definitely the big change is that nowadays the nuns study the same program, philosophical program as the monks. and they now do debating and ritual and also advanced meditation practices on a par with the monks. This is a huge big change. I mean, really a quantum leap. And so now there are nuns in the Gelugpa tradition who become Geshe-ma, which is like a professor of philosophy. And also in the other schools now, nuns are being recognized and given titles, and they themselves are teaching other nuns, and themselves have now become fully qualified. So this is a huge change. This is a huge change. And well done the monks for helping to train the nuns, you know, because who taught them and who trained them? It was the monks. Once they recognized that actually, you know, women are quite intelligent, they started to teach them and discovered how rewarding that was, because the nuns are so focused and so dedicated. And so that side of it has done very, very well. What hasn't done well is what you brought up, which is the higher ordination or bhikshuni ordination for nuns. They are still going round and round and round. There's a lot of opposition to that. However, in June, we went to Bhutan, which is a Himalayan country, the only independent Vajrayana country in the world now. And there, the head of the monastic tradition, His Holiness the J. Kempo, was giving full ordination to 142 nuns. This is the first time in Tibetan tradition when this ordination has actually been given within the Tibetan lineage of the Mula-Sarvastivada. And so 142 nuns received this full ordination from His Holiness the J. Kempo with the support of the royal family of Bhutan. The Queen Mother of Bhutan is the patron of the Bhutanese Nuns Project. And the king had written a letter requesting the J. Kempo to give this ordination. And so it had the support of the royal family and the J. Kempo, who is an absolutely impeccable monk and very learned. And so that was wonderful, fantastic. 140 nuns got ordained, but it has still been ignored by the Tibetan establishment. I mean, they just simply don't ignore it. And they say, well, that was Bhutan, that's not us. And so that is the last barrier for the nuns yet. At the moment, all nuns are just novice ordination. They don't have the full ordination. So that is really the next challenge. I don't know how and when it will be overcome. There's a lot of resistance to that. But apart from that, the nuns are very well educated now. They're well housed, they are well respected, and they have come up enormously in the last 20 or 30 years. So we are very happy for them.
Well, that's good to hear. I just, a follow-up, I'm curious what the root is of the resistance, because I understand, is it true there's a teaching in Tibetan Buddhism or somewhere that it's not possible to attain enlightenment in a female body? Is that the root of the resistance, or is that in people's mind, or?
Well, there is that teaching in Mahayana Buddhism. I mean, in certain texts that they say, but then when you ask the lamas, well, what specifically is it in the male body that's so important that without it, you know, we can't get enlightened? You know, they don't really quite know what to say. So, you know, and I've given up saying, well, you know, I aspire to Buddhahood in female body. I just say I aspire to become like Tara, and then they can't say anything.
Good.
But the main opposition to the full ordination is that at the time in the 8th century, when Guru Padmasambhava and Acharya Shantarakshita and the King Trisondetsan, they invited monks from India to come to Tibet to establish the monastic order in Tibet. They invited monks, but they didn't invite nuns. So therefore, the argument is there is no female ordination lineage in Tibet. It got broken at that time. It was not established in Tibet, and therefore it requires only a Buddha can re-establish it. And so we have to wait for Maitreya to come in 2,500 years or whenever to re-establish the female lineage. It's a very complicated situation, and other people say they're actually in this Vinaya, in the monastic rule, says there is actually no difference. The essence of a monk's ordination is the same as a female ordination. And the Buddha said, in the absence of fully ordained nuns, I allow you, O monks, to ordain nuns. So actually, if they really wanted to do it, they could do it, but they don't really want it. I mean, and this is the problem. It needs very, very high lamas who everyone respects, and the cooperation of the nuns to bring it about, as they did in Bhutan. I mean, when they decided to do it, then it got down just like that. You know, no argument. The king, the monastic board, the nuns, everybody came together and said, let's do it. And so it was done. But without that, then they just go round and round and round, researching, arguing, and never getting anywhere. So it will happen, but it's been very interesting to watch the resistance. The lack of real desire to resolve the situation and come up with a solution. So anyway, it will happen. All these things take time. The nuns now are highly educated. The good thing is that 20 years ago, when this was first brought up 30 years ago, the nuns were uneducated. They were living in very poor situations. They had a very low self-esteem, no confidence. And if they had taken the higher ordination, I don't think they would have known how to deal with it. But now they're highly motivated, they're very educated, they're much more confident, they're teachers themselves. Now is a good time. Now they could easily, uphold all, study the monastic code and do all the rituals and themselves be exemplary examples of a monastic life. So now is a good time. We should remind the boys.
Thank you. We've got a lot of nice questions coming in from our audience. Is it okay with you if I read some of those off? Okay. This one is from Vida, and it says, in daily life, how would you recommend incorporating metta for oneself? I have been a practitioner for 13 years and am recognizing that I have focused on cultivating compassion for others, but not so much for myself. I am now seeing how my own lack of compassion for myself spills over in my interactions with others.
Oh, excellent question. Excellent. The Buddha himself, when he taught metta or loving kindness and compassion and joy in the goodness, rejoicing, he said, we start with ourselves. And then from giving loving kindness, compassion to ourselves, then to those that we love, which is easy, family members, our partner, our dog, whoever, whatever being. And then to those we're indifferent towards, to those we find difficult, that we don't like, and then to all the world in general. The idea behind it is that we recognize how nice it would be to feel okay, right? How nice it would be if we felt well within ourselves and free from suffering. And so the root of the word metta is a friend. So basically what we're doing is befriending ourselves. Instead of criticizing ourselves, putting ourselves down, ignoring our own needs, we give kindness to ourselves. We make friends with ourselves. We say things to ourselves which a good friend would say to us. And in other words, we get at peace within ourselves. Then if we are genuinely friends with ourselves, since we can't leave ourselves behind, we have to take ourselves with us, even on the spiritual path, until, you know, that sense of ego dissolves. In the meantime, we've got an ego, so that poor little ego should be a happy little ego that's happy to walk the path, right? I mean, an injured sense of self, an unhappy sense of self will not be able to walk the path skillfully. And so the Buddha said we start by making the mind calm and clear, and at the same time, we give affection to ourselves. We forgive ourselves, we make friends with ourselves, we're at peace. And then with that in our heart, it's easy to give it to others. So one thing which many teachers, Asian teachers, have found is that Westerners, especially, or maybe even modern day Asians, have a hard time liking themselves. And outwardly, they might seem very confident and, you know, promoting themselves like anything. But inwardly, they actually have very low self-esteem. They're very critical of themselves, very unforgiving of themselves. And that inner conflict extends into outer conflict. So sometimes some teachers now say, well, if you have a hard time giving kindness to yourself, start with somebody who you can give loving kindness to. You know, a family member, or your partner, or as I say, your pet. It doesn't matter who, what. But just think how happy you would be if they were well and happy and free from suffering. Really, wouldn't that be lovely if they just were happy? And that warmth that you feel in the heart, then turn it back to yourself and say, you know, may you be well and happy. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese master, also recommends that you can see yourself as a child, a small child, because many people, their sense of low self-esteem is based on early upbringing, which went wrong. And so they have a lot of inner pain from early childhood, in which case to see yourself as a child and then give love to that child and heal the inner child. So, I mean, the point is that this is not just some new age kind of ideas. This is something which was taught by the Buddha himself, to make friends with ourselves. And once we have made friends with ourselves, very easy to make friends with others. So please, she should work on that, you know, really, really holding herself and recognize she's worthy of love, just as everyone else is worthy of love. We have to love all living beings, all sentient beings. We are the one sentient being we're especially responsible for. So we have to start, as the Buddha said, start with ourselves and then extend outwards.
Thank you. And thank you, Vida, for that question. There's another one here from Sabina, but it's on behalf of a group. So I'll read the question. You mentioned the importance to treat difficult interpersonal situations as learning opportunities. We are interested in difficult intercultural situations. We wrote an article on preparing to be offended by representatives of an organization called The Cultural Other. Our question is, how can Buddhist teachings help people prepare to be offended and to learn from such experiences instead of pulling back, feeling hurt?
Well, I mean, one thing I think we have to remember is that when other people are, you know, racist or aggressive or in any way offensive, it's because they themselves have problems. If we were really at peace within ourselves, we would give peace to others. I mean, anybody who has this very aggressive response to others, and seeing them as something alien and therefore in some ways threatening, have problems themselves, you know. So then how sad. Would we want their mind? This is the thing to ask ourselves. Would we want a mind which responds to others in the way that they respond to others? And we would think, no, we would hate to have a mind like that. How sad that they are trapped in that kind of narrow, biased, racist, or offensive kind of mind. I mean, that is for them very painful. They don't realize it, but actually it's not a happy state of mind. And in addition, at least from a spiritual point of view, they're making very bad karma. So in this lifetime, maybe they get away with it, but next lifetime, who knows where they're going to, what situation they're going to find themselves in, as the dark seeds which they have been sowing come up into harvest. So, instead of feeling offended, we can feel great compassion because they're obviously very screwed up. And at the same time, we can take it as an opportunity to, as I say, cultivate forbearance and tolerance, which is a very important spiritual quality which we do need and which we won't be able to cultivate if people, don't do things which cause us offense. So at the same time, when these feelings of feeling offended come up, we can recognize that and say, feeling offended, angry, hurt. And by looking at that feeling as it comes up and labeling it, we are able then to take control of that feeling and to transform it into a more positive feeling, recognizing that that feeling is a negative feeling and hurts us more than it hurts the other person. And so that's not very helpful. But first we have to recognize that we do feel, we can't pretend I don't feel offended or I don't feel angry. That is just suppression. So we allow the feeling to come up, but we recognize it when it comes up. We don't feed it, so to get swept away by it. When it comes up, we look at it, we see it, we can say, this is anger, this is hurt, this is wanting revenge. But then seeing that is a very negative response, which will not bring any good to ourselves or to others, we then have the opportunity to say, this is a time when I will transform that negative into something more positive. And this is how we advance on the path. And this is how we cultivate the qualities. Back to the gym, working out hard on the machine, right? It might be painful at the time, but in the end, we end up with a lot of strength. So, in that way, you could feel almost grateful for people who are being offensive because they're helping us to cultivate our forbearance and tolerance and compassion. So, it's not something, it doesn't, even if the ideas come into our mind, it doesn't mean that automatically habitual tendencies of many lifetimes are going to be transformed. But as the Buddha said, if you take an empty pot, drip by drip by drip, the pot is filled. So moment to moment when we manage to be in control of our mind instead of swept away by our inclinations, then we gradually become the masters of our mind instead of the slaves of our mind. And in that way, again, we can feel grateful for those who brought up the challenge. It's a learning process, right? How to turn negative into positive and to be grateful for those who expose our negativities so that we can work on them and transform them.
Thanks to Sabina and her group. There's a question here from Hoda. Hoda says, where is the fine line for bodhicitta? How can we stop it from becoming abuse? What if I am not grateful? Abuse is abuse.
Well, of course, it doesn't mean that you know, if you're in a very abusive situation, you just say, you know, hit me harder. This is a great spiritual progress. We have to also have wisdom along with our compassion, right? And somebody who is very abusive themselves are creating a lot of negative karma for themselves, as well as causing harm for the person that they're abusing. So we don't need to let them get away with it. Compassion and bodhicitta, compassion can also be quite wrathful. It's not always sweet and smiling. For example, in Buddhism, the bodhisattva of representing compassion is Avalokiteshvara Chenrezig, Kuan Yin. And that is shown white and smiling and holding a lotus and looking very sweet and very peaceful, just how we would imagine compassion would be. But in the Tibetan tradition, the other flip side of this white smiling Chenrezig is Mahakala, the great black one, who is the head of all the Dharma protectors and extremely wrathful. And that is also compassion. Just as a mother bringing up a child sometimes has to appear very wrathful to that child if they are going to do something which is very naughty and which could hurt them. They can appear very angry, but it's not because they hate the child, it's because they have compassion for that child and realize the child has to be stopped from doing something which would be harmful for the child, right? So compassion sometimes can seem very tough, but the underlying motivation is not anger, hatred, or fear. The underlying motivation is wisdom and compassion. So in that way, one stops abuse, but not by being inwardly abusive, but because on account of one's great compassion, recognizing how this abuse will cause great harm to the abuser as well as the abused and has to be stopped. And if it cannot be stopped by peaceful means, then it has to be stopped by wrathful means. I mean, if someone's cheating you, you don't just let them get away with it, because that harms them as much as yourself and will encourage them to cheat others in the future, which is not kind, right? And so therefore they need to be stopped. They need to be exposed. But the underlying motivation behind it should not be anger or desire for revenge, but out of a genuine compassion for the whole situation and trying to help them to prevent them from doing more wrongdoing. Does that make sense?
Definitely, very much. Yes, thank you. And thank you, Hoda, for that question. I think we have time for one more audience question, if that's okay with you. From Yuichi, who says, what sort of practice or approach would you suggest to help loosen or weaken one's attachment to sex? Thank you.
I'm probably not the best person to answer this sort of question, you know. The problem is always that we are, the real question is the attachment. The Buddha said that this attachment, this grasping, this clinging to something is the cause of our suffering. And we believe that attachment is if we fulfill our attachments, that it will bring happiness. But in fact, it does not bring happiness. And it brings more pain. Like greed, the Buddha said greed is like drinking salty water. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. We never can be satisfied. And likewise with our attachment to anything, to food, to drugs, to entertainment, to sex, to anything that we're attached to. It's the grasping mind which is going to cause the suffering. So I would say if you're really attached to sex and it really is a problem for you, then to take a vow to abstain from sex for a month and watch your mind, right? And just see what thoughts come up, what feelings come up. What do you think, Philippe?
I agree with this.
I mean, he's more likely to know about these things than I am.
And I did it was helpful. It was helpful to just, but important to watch the mind while you're doing it.
Yeah, to really watch the mind and see how that grasping and attachment is what's causing the pain. And that however much, I mean, you can have sex 24 hours a day and it wouldn't resolve the problem. That's the thing, that to recognize that moderation is the answer. Not, I mean, to take a vow of chastity for a month just to watch the reactions, but chastity in itself is not the answer. The answer is moderation, not overindulgence and not underindulgence. And also to, you know, in the Buddhist precepts, the third precept is sexual misconduct. And that means not exploiting others for one's own satisfaction sexually, using other people merely as a means for my satisfaction, right? That will never bring any good to anybody. And so we really need to respect others and respect ourselves and respect our sexuality, which is a very important drive, and not to misuse it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with sex in itself, but we can misuse it and also misuse the bodies of others. And this is not going to bring happiness either to the other or to ourselves. And so I think it's good that they are looking at that as something which there has to be worked on, right? This is a good thing. Not to think that it's okay, because it's not okay. Any strong attachment is not okay, whatever it is that we're attached to. We need to hold things gently and lightly and not have it dominate our mind and our bodies, because then we are just as slaves to our instincts instead of being the masters. And that's a very sad situation. So it's good if he really takes this in hand and says, okay, this is going to be my practice. I'm really going to look at this whole situation. Why am I so attached? What is it? Is my mind attached? Is my body attached? What is it which makes my sexual activity so compulsive? And really look into the whole situation. This is very good. And so that's the way to go, is to really engage the whole mind in looking at how to loosen this tightness and open it up and gain more respect for oneself and for others. I'm not suggesting he becomes a monk.
Thank you. And thank you, Yuichi, for that question. And a big thank you to Jacob Steele, who's our podcast producer and events curator at Banyen, for all the work that he does to bring in such wonderful guests and speakers like our honorable guest today. Before we say goodbye, I'm wondering, can I just ask, I know you're in, is it Lahore? 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 Yes. And Lahore, and you mentioned that there's the possibility that there will be a follow-up documentary to Cave in the Snow. I'm wondering, can you just tell us a little bit about that and any other notable projects that you would like people to know about?
Yes,
Hi,
thank
Felipe.
you. Hi, Ross. Thank you for bringing it up. Yes, we're in the progress of working on that now. This is basically a preliminary trip that we're doing with Jetsunma to get to know the place where she had spent 18 years of her life and is very close to Jetsuma's heart. So we figured we needed to come and see for ourselves and also scout the locations and the places that we're going to be filming for the documentary. We're still in pre-production stage, going into production shortly, but the idea is to portray all the events that have happened since, you know, a lot of people having read the book by Vicky Mackenzie and also the documentary that was done with Kate in the Snow, don't have much idea of what's going on right now and all the things that Jetsunma has done in all these years. So now DGL, the nunnery, is fully built, nuns are trained, and so many good things have happened. So we want to definitely show that and give the people the opportunity to connect with everything that has been going on for all this time, and to know that, you know, there has been, as Jetsunma said before, there has been some progress.
Lots of progress.
And things are looking good. So why not share that goodness with everyone? So that's why we're doing this documentary and this documentation, really, for posterity of all the things that have happened.
Wonderful. Thank you, Felipe. Jetsunma, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and share your wisdom and compassion today.
Thank you, Ross, and good luck with Banyen Books. I really hope that people get into the habit of reading real books. I mean, this is a wonderful thing. And may your whole organization really flourish with the kind of books that you are printing and publicizing, which will give enormous benefit for so many people. Wonderful, well done.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. And I'm your host, Ross Makichi. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyen.com.